Welcome to the Voice of St. Anthony Parish from Alston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM. You can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com and CatholicAudiomedia.com and your favorite podcast platform. And you can also hear us at our parish website at stanthonyalston.org. Well, we celebrated Labor Day yesterday, so let us spend this week talking to our favorite economics and labor advisor for the Small Planet Institute, Bruce Boccardi, who is a member of our parish here at St. Anthony, and he always has some great things to enlighten us about in regards to labor issues and the economy. And of course, Bruce comes from an interesting perspective. So let's begin with that.
My critique of our economic model is from a moral and ethical perspective, not strictly secular, although certainly secular resources, information, it's very important. But I think it's something that people should realize that we have a moral and ethical obligation as Christians or as Catholics to examine and to do what is necessary to bring about progressive, positive change for all working people.
It is the week of Labor Day, and one of the things you mentioned you want to talk to about is the importance of Labor Day. So what would you say?
Well, I think, Labor Day is it's a day that in the country, actually since June 28th, 1894, it's a day to appreciate the economic and the social impact of Americans and to reflect on the economic progress or not that has been made as a result of the American workforce. So it used to be a more of I think more celebrated and more visible. But since we've had, the economy, our economic model has been so just egregiously dominated by oligarchs, it's changed. That Labor Day has been, de-emphasized to some extent. The United States has a history of really bloody labor conflicts more than any other industrial nation. In fact, just a little, brief history. The first strike that was actually before there was any type of Labor Day, but the strike was in 1850. And some New York tailors were killed by police dispersing the strikers. And of course, anyone familiar with labor history in the United States knows about some of the more infamous conflicts where strikers and actually some police actually died. I mean, there's a Ludlow massacre and Memorial Day massacre in 1937, et cetera, et cetera. So what you have is our economic model transforming from an agricultural base to a more industrial base. And of course, this created the industrial base created, urban workers and factory workers, manufacturing. Just it just took off. And of course, along with that, the conditions that were created by this transformation gave rise to a lot of grievances, a lot of problems, and the rise of unions. I mean, there was no regulations back then surrounding employment, and oftentimes they took advantage. You got young children working in factories, mines, railroads, warehouses, and other dangerous work environments. You got kids as young as 5 or 6 who were working in mills, factories, and mines, and the average workday was 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to eke out a basic living. Mm-hmm. So the conditions were there to actually give rise to the union movement and to eventually what we known as Labor Day. The actual first Labor Day parade that I could find was in Lower Manhattan on September 5th, 1882, and this was like about 10 or 20,000 people were there. And this was this was before Labor Day became actual Labor Day, and then it was all part of the 1880s. The 1880s was the time, when you had serious conflicts between the owners of capital and the workers who were providing the labor for that capital. The Pullman strike, one of the more famous, as I say, infamous strikes that happened, and because the owner, George Pullman, he laid off employees, excuse me, and as oftentimes corporations are wont to do, they cut the wages and employees by 30%. And at the same time, they used to call them company stores, and in these small towns. And in Pullman, Illinois, there was the George Pullman. The town was named after him. He refused to lower rents or store prices, and this really put some severe economic burden on the people that live there, the families that live there.
You have that famous song, "I Owe My Soul to the Company Store."
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I remember that. Sure. Yeah, and because those days are pretty much gone. But that's that context that gave rise to a lot of the conflict that came later. And actually, it's interesting. The American Railway Union, which was led at the time by Eugene V. Debs, who was the first actual American socialist that I can see that ran for president, and actually he got like 1 million votes while he was in prison. But that aside, he was president of the union, the first American Railway Union, and he did not. They didn't endorse the strike initially, and this is what's happened oftentimes. Union leadership is often sort of trail behind the workers and the employees that are initiating and putting strikes into action. And finally, like on May 11th in 1894, the Pullman Palace Car Company, I guess it's in Chicago, they went out on strike. And then on June 26th, Debs called for a complete boycott of all Pullman railway cars, because that crippled the railroad traffic nationwide. So in order to break the strike, the federal government dispatched troops to Chicago, and it resulted in the deaths of 13 workers. And that's not unusual back in those days.
And if I can add, there weren't any labor laws then, were there?
No, it was pretty much whatever the employers could get away with, in order to increase their profits, that's what they did. And it, like I say, this oftentimes we would consider it violating child labor laws, let alone just basic decency. But finally, in the wake of all this massive unrest that happened in the 1880s, the Congress did pass an act making Labor Day a legal holiday in the District of Columbia, D.C., and the territories. But it took 12 years later, and the idea of a working man's holiday, they called it, was celebrated on the first Monday in September, and it caught on. Many states passed legislation, and they recognized it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, June 28th, 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed it. And just as an addendum, I've kind of gone on here a little bit, but as an addendum, in 1968, the Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which
that's right.
It ensured that Labor Day would always be observed on Mondays, so that federal employees could have a 3-day weekend.
Now, unions and all of this is really a product of the Industrial Revolution.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So you didn't have those issues, or you may have had those issues, but not to the level of the Industrial Revolution, where basically our whole form of the economy radically changed.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the colonial period, that's where actually, the beginning of the labor movement, if you will, can be seen. Back in the colonial times, there were different types of crafts and trades, and there was conflict way back then. I don't have all that stuff at my right now in those notes, but I've written on it before that. This is, if you will go back into the history, that's where a lot of it began, the Knights of Labor, and there was a lot of little sort of incipient labor organizations that eventually, there was conflict, there was strikes, but at the same time, I shouldn't say strikes, there was conflict. There may have been, nominal strikes, but nothing really organized to the level that happened after the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s.
You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL. We'll be right back. Don't forget to tell others where they can find our program. You can hear us on WROL 950 AM and WROLradio.com at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We then podcast the program on your favorite podcast platform and at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also hear us at our parish website, that's St. AnthonyAlston.org. That is StAnthonyAlston.org. Let others know where you can find us and spread the word about the Catholic Audio Media podcast. We're going to be back tomorrow with more with Bruce Boccardi. As a matter of fact, we're going to listen to him all week. He's got some great things to share with us. And of course, Bruce talks to us a lot of the union issues because he was the president of a union. But at the same time, all these issues affect all of us on an economic level. He'll even talk to us about one way that Abraham Lincoln pointed that out. Kind of fascinating. So we'll be back tomorrow with more with Bruce Boccardi. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.